and welcome back to Mixed Media. We're here for another Tuesday of your favorite podcast, obviously. And we'll be talking today about some gaming stuff from a filmmaker's perspective as our main topic for today, so that should be cool. But before we start all of that, start our Tuesday night ritual, let's introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Hi, my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
My name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
And if you're new to the show, first of all, welcome. You can definitely chat, comment, whatever you want during this episode, and we'll be sure to read your chats and involve you into the podcast. That's the beauty of doing this live, is that we get to interact with y'all and it becomes an interactive show. So that's totally welcomed. But second, Mixed Media is a weekly live stream podcast where we go over all aspects of art, pretty much, from our respective perspectives, typically. But pretty much anything you could possibly think of, whether it's history, reviews, pop culture, philosophy, tutorials, technique, pretty much anything you could possibly think of. We like to do this because we like what we do. So, and it gives us an excuse to talk about what we do in very obscure detail and at just random topics. So, I highly suggest that if you are skeptical at the focus of this podcast, you have a right to be, but you should check our gigantic catalog of stuff, and you will see that there is almost certainly, in the hundreds of segments that we've done, there's almost certainly a segment that will speak to you, and that might speak to some of your friends, so give it a share, if that's the case. So with that, how are you guys' weeks?
Yeah, my week was all right. I think, kind of busy in the first half, and then I spent a lot of time this weekend at DCLX, or the DC Lindy Exchange, which is a really massive event, which I guess it's kind of become like the Lindy Hop Exchange in the United States. People
What's
from
a Lindy Hop Exchange?
So I guess you can have different types of dancing events for Lindy Hop. There's some things like have competitions and classes. So at an exchange, the era really for exchanges was like 15 years ago, I understand. Where I guess after kind of the swing dancing renaissance in the 90s and early 2000s, my understanding is that basically the kind of local communities kind of splintered off from each other, and these exchanges were a way of bringing people, different communities together, and it was just dancing, so no competitions, no classes, you just dance for a weekend. Now there's some smaller ones, but really the big one is DCLX. And it was great. A lot of really fantastic musicians, people from all over the United States, in a hall from, I think, 1931. Really, really fantastic dancing experience. Definitely the largest thing I've ever attended. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do that. I certainly learned a lot about what I'm doing, and it's really great when you have I don't want to say this. I certainly had some opportunities where I felt like I was actually doing something artistic, not just fun and technical, but actual moments of something just art and artistic sort of creation. Which I don't know that I've really had before, but there's certainly some great dancers there that allowed that to happen. So it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Nice. This might sound a little bit crazy, but I am considering joining some sort of dance studio or something, because
Ooh.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, probably no less crazy than it is that I'm dancing. So,
I don't know. Traditionally, I very much
or
dislike
more,
dancing.
no more crazy, no more crazy. I mean, I am pretty sure until the day that I first decided to try swing dancing, I don't think you could have paid me enough money to like touch a dance floor with a 20-foot pole.
Okay. Maybe
So
we're in the same boat then, I guess. Yeah, I feel like it's something that I should just learn to do eventually. I don't know what kind of dance or whatever. Just generally speaking, though, and also, since like, well, I don't know. I was somewhat active in college, I guess, but since high school, especially, like, I don't play soccer anymore, and I don't have high school gym anymore. So like, I'm just sitting at my desk all day. So I should do something. So, yeah.
I can say from experience, if you dance for like 4 or 5 hours, and that'll give you plenty of cardio.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Also, it was your birthday, Ben. So, happy birthday.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you again.
Yes. Did you do anything for it, or?
No, I went out to dinner with my family. But
Okay, gotcha.
Nothing terribly special.
Gotcha. Cool. I'll go quickly because nothing happened for me this week. So now over to Nathan.
Oh, kind of same. Yeah, that's all I have.
Yes, quite boring.
I feel like ever since work started, things are just a lot more like dry. Well, like everything's a little more regular, and there's less time to do things. Yeah, spontaneously, I guess. In college, things are kind of random. So yeah.
Yes, this is the working life. How about news? Any interesting news?
I do have.
Oh, you muted, I think.
Yeah, I did, my bad.
Okay.
I do have news. So, Embracer Group, which is a video game holdings company, announced that they are splitting in 3. I don't know what this means. Embracer Group is a very large holding company for video games. I don't know. I'm confused by the language here, right? So, for example, if you go to Embracer.com, like right smack dab in the front, it says, "This is the start of a new chapter. Embracer Group announces its intention to transform into 3 standalone publicly listed entities on NASDAQ Stockholm." Okay. I don't know what that means because, okay, so we're splitting into 3 entities. Cool. So it's a standalone, which makes you think that, like, Embracer Group won't exist anymore. But that doesn't seem to be the case, considering that, like, I think you can still, I think they still, like, in, like, their frequently asked questions section, they have a whole section now on, like, this whole transition or whatever. Like, it seems like the company will still exist? Question mark? I don't know. I'm not attuned to the business lingo, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening. That'd be pretty crazy if it stopped existing. But yeah, Embracer Group has been going through tough times, which is very interesting because I think probably many months ago, maybe over a year ago, I probably reported on Embracer Group expanding and buying studios like crazy. And now they are doing the exact opposite. So I think they laid off 1,300 employees, I think, or something like that, across studios, and they closed down some of their like some pretty successful studios. Seemingly like the ones that made us Time Splitters. I can't remember what the studio's name is. They closed. I think on the. Yeah, and I'm looking at this article here. It says they canceled 29 unannounced games in 2023. Kind of crazy. And they closed the Saints Row developer as well. So, yeah. But, and apparently, Gearbox and Saber Interactive were sold. Oh. So the company still exists, that means. If some things are not sold. If they're selling some things, all right. Gearbox made Borderlands, so that's really big. I don't know what Saber Interactive did. I don't know what they're about, but so yeah, that's not good for them. Although I don't really have an issue because less consolidation is kind of nice, so that's cool. But that's all I got.
Sweet. I can go quickly again because I don't have much to say, but I I don't remember if I mentioned this before, because this happened, I think, a few weeks ago, and stop me if I already did. Netflix announced that they are no longer going to report their subscriber counts on their quarterly reports, saying that user engagement is the number one factor for growth, which makes absolutely no sense given.
Yeah, isn't it like engagement? Like unless you're gonna start paying for more, like, I currently pay for like 5% of Netflix's holdings, and now I gonna pay for 25% of it. I don't know. Like, that's not how their model works, right?
No, yeah, it's not how it works.
So,
They said that they're, I don't know, I don't use Netflix anymore, so I'm not sure how it's changed, because I know at a prior, or maybe it was this meeting, they talked about adding ads as a revenue source to Netflix, which they've obviously never done before. So maybe this is kind of part of that strategy, is saying like engagement matters more now because ads will drive revenue. But
that's a weird thing to say if there are no ads yet. It's not a confirmed feature. I don't know, confirmed thing.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think we're seeing the this is the death rattle coming from Netflix, as they've probably hit peak subscribers, and if they don't show year over or month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter, whatever metric growth in their subscriber base, then their stock is going to retract drastically, right? Because that's the only growth potential that they have, and they're trading at a crazy multiple that they don't deserve to be trading at, on the premise that sometime in the future they will be worth like 10 times more than what they're worth now, like they're a startup or something. That's how Wall Street is currently valuing such companies, is like they're startups still. But that, again, goes back to discussions we've had over and over on this show. So yeah, that's bad. And that kind of goes in conjunction with a lot of, once in a while I'll mention economic stuff on here, because I think it's important that people understand. Some have some idea, some planning, look things up yourself, make your own decisions. But remember that banking crisis that we've done episodes about? Yeah, it's returning. So, as predicted, and that it couldn't sustain itself in the current economic regime. So there are actually some banks now who are making statements about their financials, and it's really kind of terrifying. You have like Citi making some statements. JP Morgan's CEO sold 1 million shares recently of JP Morgan, which is the largest bank in the United States. 1 million shares is equivalent to something like, I think, $50 million or something like that, or like $100 million. I don't remember. Obviously, there's a connotation of hedging, right? When the CEO is no longer believes in the growth of the stock that he owns, he's going to sell it. So, and Jamie Dimon is quite a powerful person, like maybe top 100 most powerful people in the whole world. Jamie Dimon being the CEO of JP Morgan. So that's fascinating in of itself. And there are a lot of mainstream economists who are saying stuff that I've known for a year and a half now. And I'm starting to learn, because this is my first time as someone who's dabbling in the economic sphere, going through like a recessionary cycle, like with consciousness, right? So the interesting thing about that is, like, the hardest part I've realized about trying to capitalize off of prior knowledge is psychology of the people who are currently in the market, right? So, like, okay, I know something in advance, like a year and a half in advance, let's say, but I don't know how people will react to it psychologically, right? Like, that's like a whole other question. And if I don't know that, then it doesn't matter if I know a year and a half, the same data that people are talking about today, as if it's revolutionary data. And so it's just been interesting seeing, like, everyone go, oh my gosh, all these underlying numbers that have been true for like the past year and a half or 2 years, and everyone's kind of starting to panic. So, that's not great news, but I just wanted to let you know, because, you should start planning, save money, do all the sane things that people do, in times of uncertainty. So There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I not really sure that I've seen anything notable in music news, except that lots of interesting, responses and fallouts to the story I mentioned last week on the news segment. Yeah, so I guess if you missed that, you can kind of you can go back to last week and see what I said. But basically, it's just story about the some very, very bad things that some members of the New York Philharmonic did to two other members of the New York Philharmonic, and legal issues and all sorts of culture and cultural issues and things like that. Yeah, I'm sure if you just look that up, if you're interested, you will find lots about that, but not necessarily stuff that should be mentioned on a show like this. So if you're interested, you can read about that. And yeah, lots of interesting things, legal things, fallout things from that, but not really easy to comment on. So that's mostly what I've been reading this week in music news.
Nice. Not good news either.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Sweet. So before we go into our main segment here, got to give a shout out to our awesome supporters. That's 909 Crime, Post, K Kairos, and Alex Egbert, who support us at mixedmedia.locals.com. If you go to the description, there's a link to that where you can join them. You can also go to mixedmediapodcast.com to find any link you could possibly need, especially our Discord. That's the place to be if you want to hang out and talk and whatever, share stuff throughout the week, and also participate in Fun Fridays. Although I dropped the ball last week because I completely forgot until 20 minutes beforehand, so that's my fault. I think I kind of I might end up doing stuff a little bit more spontaneously throughout the week, but that's a whole other thing. So yeah, hit those links, hit us up, and hit the like button if you're enjoying anything that you hear during this podcast. And if you don't like anything, I'd be sad if you hit the dislike button, but bring some feedback with it too, if you can, because we want to improve. So with that, on to our main segment of the night, which is me talking about storytelling and gaming. I guess I should hit the gaming button. Here we go.
Mixed Media Gaming.
And welcome back to Mixed Media. Thank you so much for sticking around with us if you've been watching so far. Shout out to all of y'all who turn up week to week. We really appreciate it. This episode here, I'll be talking about storytelling and gaming. I'm not a game dev. I'm not a particularly well played. Is that the word? Well read, well played,
well versed in gaming.
I'm not that particularly well versed in the canon of gaming, right? I'm a casual gamer. My playing history is mostly free to play stuff. So.
I don't think is that you wouldn't say I'm well listened. For your music, it doesn't make sense. So.
Right. But this is part of a little crossover series. So last episode, Nathan talked about Japanese rock music, and why he stopped listening to American rock music. So, and he does game dev stuff. And so this week I'll be talking about game dev stuff as a filmmaker. So that should be cool. But before we begin here, we should reintroduce ourselves for those just stopping in. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Hi, my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
My name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer. And one thing I forgot to say actually in the news segment that's highly relevant now is that there is a Fallout show that came out. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's kind of crossover in of itself.
Yeah.
Sweet. Actually, I'm curious. Is there any recommendation, you Nathan, or anyone in the audience? Do you have a recommendation for a a video game turned into a movie in particular, because I'm probably not going to watch a TV show. Almost certainly won't. So, is there a video game turned into a movie that actually turned out well and you would recommend?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure they exist.
I mean,
but
I think back in the day, like I used to think some of the Pokemon movies were good, like when I was a little kid. I'm not sure how well they hold up these days, but you know.
Yeah, that's true.
Granted, they are kind of continued. Well, they're like not even in the same universe really as the TV shows either, because they like don't really have any impact on the TV shows. So I don't know. I used to like some of those when I was a kid, but again, I don't know how well they hold up these days.
Yeah.
There's a Rotten Tomatoes page for 52 video game movies ranked. I don't know if this is based on opinion or the tomato. Oh, yeah, based on the tomato meter. So this is what random people think, I guess. This is the critical one. I don't know. Regardless. But apparently at the top is, I don't know what game this is based off of. Werewolves Within?
Never heard of it.
Oh, the second one is the Angry Birds movie 2. The third one is Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Why are the second ones better than the first?
I don't know. It's not. That's usually it's pretty uncommon. The next one is Pokemon Detective Pikachu. I forgot about that one. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of funny. The one after that, I saw this and I was like, why would they make a movie? It's Gran Turismo. It's called Gran Turismo based on a true story. That's the entire name. Apparently, that's. I mean, we're looking at by 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the fifth best one, and we're at a 65% already. So it's not looking, it's not looking great. It's 65% by critics. Apparently, 98% by audience. Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's amazing. I have no idea. But I mean, it's very strange because, like Gran Turismo, I never played it. I didn't think it had a story. And if it does, there's no way it's it's not like no one talks about it like they talk about like Need for Speed stories or whatever. People review Need for Speed like, okay, and the story was like this. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about Gran Turismo and be like, oh, and this is what I thought about the story. I don't know if it has a story. So I don't know like what does it mean to be a Gran Turismo game? Is it just a movie? Is it just a racing movie? I don't know. But
I have no clue. Well, that doesn't give me very much hope.
I was going to say, maybe coming from the opposite end, I've always felt that the movie 1917, minus like the frame, the very beginning, very end, feels, not that I've ever played Battlefield or Battlefront, but
Battlefield.
But it's like Battlefield. Here you go. It shows you how. But I did.
Battlefront is the Star Wars one. I assume that's not what you're talking about.
No, yeah. I did get to see plenty of that getting played. When I was in college, I watched a lot of people, my roommates playing video games, and it really feels like it's like trying to be. It's like a continuous shot, almost first person, like World War I adventure, so to speak. It's shot in a way that it feels like it's got like that video game perspective, minus like the very, like the frame narrative, so to speak, like the actual frame.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah. A few chats here. So Kai says, Irving, if you do My Child Won't Let Me Sleep, so it's midnight gaming. I'm there. That will almost certainly happen. I think the biggest barrier a lot of times for me just like streaming when I'm gaming is like I just never have done that. So it's just like weird to me. Like I'm like, oh wait, I could just stream while I'm gaming, but it just feels weird. I don't know. So we'll see if I can get over that. He also says, I feel like the concept of literacy applies to the gaming medium, at least abstractly. Oh, certainly. Yeah, there's literacy in all art forms. You need some
literacy. Then there's Ben with video games. Battlefield, Battlefront,
Yes. The last thing he says is, the story of Gran Turismo is car goes fast and I learn a Cardigan song I didn't know.
See?
Yeah, I think that confirms the suspicion there.
Yeah. And by the way, there you could go the other way where it's like movies turn into games, not like literally, not in the 1917 way, but like The Walking Dead, for example, right? Maybe, oh wait, what about The Last of Us was a game that went to a show. I forgot about that. People like that? I don't know.
I heard some good things initially, but like I just can't like. I don't know. I saw the trailer and I was like, I feel like this is gonna make me sad in terms of like I probably won't like it, but maybe I'm wrong and I should give it a chance. But it's also a show, so I have to commit to it. And I don't know. Not likely.
Right.
Okay. Well, all that introduction aside, so what is the goal for today? What are we doing for today? Well, I'm going to attempt to talk about gaming as if I know a single thing about it, and Nathan will probably be correcting me as I go along, as I say a bunch of generalized statements that don't make much sense in certain cases, and I'm sure that's all going to happen. But it's a mixed media crossover episode, so that's just going to be what it is. So I'm just thinking about it from my limited gaming experience. I have not sat down for hours on end to think about the things that I'm saying right now. I'm just trying to take the general principles of storytelling, even abstracted away from cinema, which is where I mostly think of story, just storytelling in general, and thinking about how that could apply to gaming. And I think, regardless of what I say, I think a lot of people would agree with me that the state of storytelling in gaming is a little sus. It's a little bad.
Look, they couldn't find good stories. They went to Gran Turismo. That tells you something.
So, I mean, they're fantastic games with fantastic stories, but it's not generally, a common experience. So, what I'm going to say right now, I think if you're a game dev, like if you're an indie game dev and you're a one-man band or like a one-person or like a 3-person team or whatever you are, if you're a small team and you don't have a dedicated writer or dedicated director, a concept I'll be talking about as well, you can take things from this and apply as you need. And I'd be interested if you could leave comments or chats or whatever, or drop in on the Discord and let me know what things you found interesting and how you're applying them or plan to apply them and all that kind of stuff. I would love to hear it. Okay, so where to begin? Let's talk about the term cinematic, because it's a term used a lot. And it has like all the connotations and none of the definitions. And I'm not going to give a definition because it's not relevant. The reason I want to mention it is because it's used a lot in gaming reviews, gaming sort of marketing stuffs, right? Trailers, cinematic trailer, right, for a game or something like this, right? All this kind of stuff. We use the word cinematic, right? And I think I want to address what that's trying to get at in terms of what people may want from that, right? Like what other than just epic moves, something a little bit more than that. And I think what it is that cinema has this sort of cachet, or it's gotten this sort of cachet of having a very memorable, perhaps thought-provoking, certainly epic, and epic kind of being like you're in something bigger than life, right? Life itself, sort of vibe to it. And a lot of people want their games to sort of feel like that. So, but that does not mean that these mediums have this relation enough that you can just kind of copy paste, right? What works really well for a movie and just kind of paste it into gaming, or vice versa, right? These are completely separate mediums that happen to both have the ability to tell stories. Cinema being, actually, maybe this could be disputed, but I would say that filmmaking is a storytelling medium in its entirety. Almost anything, even the most abstract things you watch, like a French montage from, like, I don't know, the 50s or something, or 60s, right? These things are still telling stories, even though they're super abstract, right? The story is just more abstract. So, we both have storytelling mediums, but I'm not going to treat it as if I'm just going to port cinema, right, to gaming, because it's a completely different medium. What's a prime example of this that hopefully illustrates the point? there is a movement not too long ago, or at least in my old memory, like 10 years ago, there's a huge movement to basically introduce like 360-degree video filmmaking, right? So I'm sure you've seen 360 videos before where you got controlled to look around and stuff like this and whatever. And I have a 360 camera, which can do stuff like that, and I published 360 videos before. And it's super cool, super fun. But there was a movement to sort of like everyone's like, this is a new category of cinema. We're going to extend the filmmaking craft into 360 video. And as you can see by the fact that you don't watch 360 films, that did not happen. And the reason that did not happen, and I experienced this because I actually was curious, and I watched a actually very highly produced, kind of short, long film. It was, I think, 30 minutes or so, project. That was a contained film that was all shot in 360. And I abhorred the experience. Like, it was it was really bad. And I think the thing I abhorred the most was that I think it was trying to be something that was outside of its definition, right? And it made me realize that the definition of movies has to contain some sort of fixed viewing, controlled viewing thing, right? Like, the craft of cinema is about fixed frames, you know. I'm not giving you a choice of what you can look at is literally so core to the art form that you can't remove it. And then when you do things like fade through edits on a 360 video, or like, I don't know, it all comes off as like really forced and like you're just trying to port something, right, to a new medium, and it doesn't feel like it really belongs. The 360 camera's moving and you just feel like a floating omniscient, like you know, sort of being as you look around at things that don't matter, and frames don't mean anything anymore compositionally and stuff like this. And so all of that is kind of interesting, but that doesn't mean that 360 video isn't a medium that could hold an art form. It just means it's not cinema. It's just a different thing. And perhaps maybe someone's made awesome stuff since then, and they've kind of broken free of those sort of cinema tools only, at least, and they've done something else. So that to me is what I'm trying to say. We're not going to port cinema to gaming, although I come from that background, so I might use a lot of language from there. Okay. So in order to talk about storytelling, we need to talk about stories. And believe it or not, all stories contain something. So what's that is it Hemingway that has the famous shortest story ever told? I'm gonna butcher it if I try to say it. It's like one sentence or two sentences. I think it's something like "baby shoes never sold" is literally, or never worn, or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's never worn.
Yeah, baby shoes. Period. Never worn. Period. And that's a story. Right? And I think we all immediately understand the story. You know, it's not a particularly happy one, unfortunately, but it is a story told in 2 sentences, right? But all the components of story are there, right? There's even tension, right? Oh, we're gonna say something, Nathan?
Yeah, is this supposed to be, like, was he trying to demonstrate the shorter story that could be told, or... Okay, because it's for sale, baby shoes never worn. But okay. I was curious if the for sale was like, if he was trying to make it the shortest story possible, if the for sale was necessary. That's what I was wondering. But
actually,
not that much. But
I don't know what the context was. If he was trying to be as short as humanly possible, I'm not sure. But certainly quite concise. And actually the for sale, now that you said it, I'm like, that's even more imagery, like, you know, kind of baked into it, and even makes it even more beautiful. Go ahead.
It also says that apparently it is unlikely that he wrote this. But
yeah. Okay. Well,
this is attributed to him, although the link to him is unlikely, according to Wikipedia. I don't know.
Whoever wrote this wrote a story. That's very concise. And so what elements are in this concise story? There's tension. In fact, literally the length of it causes tension, right? Like, you're like, how am I going to get this whole story out of just 2 sentences, basically, or 1.5 sentences, right? There's also tension in the ordering, right? So he could have said, never sold baby shoes, right? Or whoever wrote it could have said it the other way around. There's intention, there's order, it's all organized to create what we think of in storytelling as an arc, right? Even at that length, we still have an arc, right? We don't do on mixed media the 3-act story or the stupid rising tension, falling tension, denouement garbage that you learned in school. So throw that all away. I'm sorry if you're a game dev and that was the only thing that you had and you were like, I'm going to use this to write my stories. It ain't going to work. Just throw it away. It's actually quite simple, and that's what I'm going to distill here. But this tiny little story is also a 1-act story, right? So we have this concept of acts, which basically is this kind of codification of the idea of these like arcs that tend to happen in stories. If you tell a story to your friend, about just something funny that happened in your day, you will tell it, especially if you're an entertaining person. People have varying levels of good at doing this, right? But most people, even people who are not terribly charismatic, they will still structure their story not to be as tight to reality as possible, but as to affect the person listening to it in the way they desire. And that's not necessarily, they're not lying to that person, right? Although they might say everything that actually happened, but they're going to position things in just the right way. They might foreshadow automatically, right? They might say, well, this would happen later, but we're going to get to that, that kind of thing. All the elements of story tend to be in the natural way that we want to tell stories, which is great news, because even if you don't know how to tell a story in a formal sense, it's kind of built in, it's kind of something that you have the ability to do.
I mean, we also can't not construct a narrative, right? Because we're not like a camera that has captured reality, right? If I'm like relaying a conversation that I had, with somebody else, I may literally use the words, or I may not remember literally the exact words, but I'll probably remember how I felt, and what I thought the intent was, and that may color it precisely the way that I phrased what the other person said, even if that's not literally true to life, because I don't remember exactly what they said, and I may not even want to give it exactly what they said. I want to convey the effect more than the literal words.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And if you're familiar with interrogations, this is really random, but I promise all these things are related. But if you think about police interrogations, if you know anything about that, you know that there's this concept, if you're trying to figure out if someone's lying to you, right? There's this concept of loping, right? Loping is this idea that when someone's recounting the past, they don't tend to be they don't tend to tell the story in a way that is robotic, just like Ben was saying. They don't tend to they remember the exact phrasing of things. There's going to be a lot of things mixed in there that were psychologically happening at the time, and so there's going to be this natural rise and fall as they talk. Even in sentences, this happens. Even in a sentence, you have this rise and fall, right? And this is always this human compulsion, even in an interrogation, to create tension and release it, because that's actually how we live, we think about how our day went in terms of what was the most crazy thing that happened today and what led up to it, and then we'll kind of repeat it in such a way that it kind of rises and falls, right? That's called loping. When you're looking for if someone's lying, they don't do that. They kind of rigidly, because they rehearsed it in their head and they think that that's how people talk, and it's not, right? So it's all natural, basically. But we can codify some of these ideas so it's easier to talk about, and easier to actually break free of. So there's going to be a lot of people, artists out there who, I suppose, have this postmodern idea that that creativity comes from no rules. I hope we're kind of getting beyond that. I think we're kind of getting beyond that as a society. I think that's good. But, you know, as most people in all of history thought, you become more free as you master the basics, right? You become more free to do things, right? Not less free. You can think of probably one odd example of some person who didn't do XYZ things to sort of give themselves background and was naturally amazing, and I'm sure, right? But, you know, just generally speaking, it is good to understand the constraints so that when you break them highly consciously, right? You want to have control over the craft, right? Okay, so let's codify some of these things. And some of these things I've talked on the show before. You can check out Screenwriting 101, and I'm not going to go through it in the same detail that I did in that episode. So look up Screenwriting 101 on our channel if you want a more in-depth sort of, and 102, if you want a more in-depth discussion on some of these things. The number one thing for stories is the reason you're telling them. And as I was writing my outline, I was trying to think of a way to say this that was a little bit more approachable, because I think if I said instead with the language that I would normally use, I'd say every story needs a theme, right? You might like think, oh my gosh, I need this. Like, no. Let's rephrase that. Every story needs a reason to be told. So even your most fun story, that is, even if I'm like going back to our personal examples, even if I'm telling a story about this stupid thing I did earlier today, there's a reason I'm telling the story, or else I'm just torturing the person I'm talking to by forcing them to listen to me blab on and on and on. I have to give them a reason to care, right? Even if it's just comedy, right? Even if it's just fun or camaraderie, or there's a plethora of reasons, but you need a reason to tell your story. I think on this point, actually, first and foremost, is where gaming ends up falling short the most, right? Is there's a story, but there's no reason for that story to exist. It's kind of there because there should be one, right? Like, you know, it's kind of a placeholder story. Am I right, Nathan? Or,
Yeah, I feel like that's what I would do. It's like, oh, make a game. Maybe story-driven. I don't know. What story are we telling today?
Right. So let's try to flip that on its head a little bit and say, why do you want to make this game to begin with? Now, if your answer is something and you feel kind of type of way about it, and you're like, well, I really only want to make it because I want to experiment with this one mechanic idea. Guess what? I write stories because one image haunts my mind. Like, it literally, like, you know, like there's just like this very strong image, right? One that comes to mind in one of my screenplays, an image that came to me very early on was this scene on a hill, and we have this character who's wearing a cowboy hat, and he's at the hill is a grave, right? A graveyard, and in the background you can see the city on fire with plumes of smoke, right? Like rising up from it at around sort of blue hour, you know, time. So you have that blue-orange contrast. You got the hill looking down. You got depth, and you've got the silhouette, right? Just an image that just like baked itself into my mind immediately. Now I'm going to make a reason that image should exist. You know, like I'm going to write around that image, and sometimes it's not that image. Sometimes it's a line of dialogue, or it's it could be a whole scene. It could be the desire to use a certain type of character. There's all kinds of reasons I might build a story that are not just the story just appeared in my mind, or like I have a theme or something beforehand, right? To write around. You can start with something that seems more trivial, but it's actually not trivial. It's very important. So take that idea and say, I want to expose that idea. This is my recommendation. I want to expose that idea as well as I possibly can, and so I need to give it its best accoutrements, best furniture around it that I possibly can to make it really shine, right? So if you've come up with a novel mechanic, think about why you might use that mechanic, right? What kind of story might that mechanic actually not just be interesting or fun, but might actually contribute to the depth of, right? Or contribute to the whatever audience that you're trying to capture, what might be going on in their life, or whatever it is, make a reason for it to exist. And until you have that reason, this is hard, don't make the game. It's hard. There are still images that I have. There's no story for them. But I'm not going to just go, haphazardly. It would be doing disservice, right? To that sort of, to that thing, to not give it a good home, right? Yes. So, have restraint is the recommendation there. Okay, so that addresses the whole reason for being thing, and that is what we call theme. That you can describe in the theme of things. Okay, so that's one piece of vocab. Another piece of vocab would be act structure, like I said earlier. Now, like I said, everything has act structure. Even that small story that we talked about at the beginning has a rise and a fall. It has this our speech just does this. It's just baked into us, right? And that is what we call an act. That's what we're trying to capture, a unit of rising and falling. And that unit of rising and falling is going to necessarily be somewhat objective. So we have a few nice things in storytelling to help us to identify them. What did I say?
Is that objective?
I meant to say subjective, yes.
Okay.
So we're going to create a rule around it so that we can, again, learn the ropes really well, apply it, and then learn how to break it, right? And even when you say you learn how to break it, even that kind of feeds into the postmodern thing. It's not even that. You're actually intentionally, using this rule to your advantage, right? Okay, so how might you know when an act starts and ends, and how to structure your story inside that act? Well, an act ends when something major happens, something especially that's irrevocable, right? So usually this is in a story, it's oftentimes a decision, right? If it's a character-driven story, someone makes a decision that cannot be undone. They say, "I hate you" to that person, and those words can never be retracted, right? They decide to kill someone or whatever. You get what I'm saying. Or it could be something that's sort of an act of God, right? Like it could be a natural disaster occurs, or a car crash that's no one's fault happens, or something like this, like something that alters, in the context of your story, the trajectory forever, right? There you can kind of identify acts in cinema. Now in gaming, this might be a little odd, because you might be like, I'm not telling that kind of story, but we'll come back to that towards the end. Okay, another word would be pace. Pace is kind of what you think it is. It's how fast you're moving through the elements of the story. So in cinema, I control pace through editing, I control pace through directing, and through writing, right? My characters could say the dialogue fast, I could cut from shot to shot fast, or from scene to scene fast, I could give you no space to breathe, or I could give you a lot of space to breathe. Pace, right? There is a lot of different pacing in gaming. I mean, think about something that's a little bit more slow-paced, like Last of Us, maybe, is a little bit on the slower side in terms of pacing, versus something that's a little bit higher paced, like it's a good example there, Nathan.
For like the story pace?
Yeah.
High pace, fast paced story. I can think of tons of stories, but I don't know if they're fast. I don't know what's the nature of the game where you just spend so much time doing like things, Like, I don't know. Games are long.
Yeah, games are long. Yes, and that'll be important to some things I say later as considerations. We'll come back to this. And the last thing that we're going to keep this simple. Obviously, you could think of way more things when you think of story, but the last thing that we're going to think about as a component of story is who you're talking to, which is always 1000% important. You are never making art for a general audience. If you're making art for yourself, right, you probably don't care about anything in this episode. Because why, right? You know, if you're making it for yourself, it's for you. But most people who are watching this, 99% of you, are making it for other people to play, right? And therefore, there's an audience to it. And you've got to make a decision as to who that is. Now, there's this concept of a general audience, which almost all the stories I write are general audience stories, even though there's a kind of niche that might enjoy it more or less or whatever, or it might appeal to a certain type of person, or certain people with certain experiences might vibe with it better. But the concept of a general audience piece of artwork is that anyone can come to it and you expect them to like it, or at least want to like it, right? You expect them to give your game a chance, right? Even if they're not even in the target demographic per se. This is something you have to decide immediately, because if you're not making something general audience, you need to understand the niche that you're talking to. If you're going to block everyone out and just say, I'm talking to you guys, right? I'm only talking to people in college, really. I'm not even talking to people who are who can relate to these things or these general themes. I'm really only talking to people who are currently in college. If that's the kind of story you're going for, you have to understand that community to a T. You might be in college, but that's not enough, right? Like, you need to understand everyone who's watching that, what exactly, and you have to figure out how you're going to cause the blocking out of other people, right? And effectively communicate this ain't for you, right? Most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, people want to make general audience stuff, and this is going to require concessions to accessibility, right? This happens in all storytelling. So imagine I'm talking to my friend about a story that happened to me. I might use a whole bunch of inside jokes, like lingo, like, a whole bunch of things that, like, if someone else were listening into the story, they'd be like, I'm lost, man. Like, who's Coconut Head? Like, I don't even know who you're talking about. Like, I don't get what's happening, and that's because I've taken my story and I've niched it to that one person, and you kind of do that naturally, right? If I'm talking to a whole bunch of people, especially if I don't know where each of those people are going to come from, I'm going to need to do more explaining and background work. And all of a sudden, that's a lot more constraining on what I can get away with in terms of freedom of expression, right? You can kind of cheat common experiences here and there to shortcut a few things, but generally speaking, you're going to have to know what you're dealing with in terms of a general audience. That does not mean you can ignore the core, right? So I think every general audience still has a core audience within it, right? So a Top Gun movie's core audience might be those who really like aircraft and cinematography, honestly. It doesn't have to be nerdy, right? They just like those topics, right? What was another one here? 10 Things I Hate About You. Its core audience is younger females who like romance stories, right? That's its clear core audience. I happen to really like that movie, even though I'm not in that core audience, because it's a general audience film, right? It can appeal to everybody, right? Okay. There you go. So this concept of audience, you need to think about this before you even put pen to paper as to what you're doing. And you need to figure out your core audience, and then you need to think about how you're going to make the story accessible to other people. Okay. Now let's get into more gaming-specific stuff, now that we've got the general stuff down. One example that I thought of immediately in terms of the power of gaming to tell stories is actually from a really bad campaign, which is, I think I've maybe mentioned this on the show before, I'm not sure. But this is the Battlefield 4 campaign. Generally just not that interesting in general. I played it for completion's sake, It's generally not that fun because Battlefield is a multiplayer game, and that's kind of what its existence is for. But in the campaign, there's one really affecting moment that like really like captured me for like the moment that it happened, which is there's a moment where I don't remember the story as to why these things happened or whatever, but basically someone appears around the corner and the context makes you think that that person is there to kill you, right? So you kind of take a very
I think I know
quick...
what this is.
Yes. You take a very quick preemptive shot. Like you like, naturally as a gamer, right? You're like, I know what I'm supposed to do right now. I'm supposed to shoot this person very effectively. And they like round a corner or something, or like I don't remember the exact thing. But
I think I remember this pretty. This is crazy because I don't think this is me playing it. I think this is me watching you play and me remembering it somehow to this day.
Okay.
And that being like the only thing I remember. I believe you're in a building, right? We're talking about the same thing. Hopefully, it's not entirely separate. But you're in a building, and like you enter a room, and there's a room to the right, and in that room there's a person, but like you don't really like. I guess like you're not really thinking about it, right? You're just like, oh, person die. is the thought,
right? And so when I took that, like when you kind of used your sort of gamer muscle memory and everything, you just kind of go, whoosh, ended. And then the moment right after you realize that was an innocent person, or at least maybe it wasn't innocent. I don't remember the context, but at least
I think there were
that
two
required
people, right?
moral judgment.
I feel like there were two people. Maybe I'm just misremembering. Maybe I'm making things up at this point. I gotta look this up. I'll look it up while I'm talking. But I think there were two people. One of them might have been bad. One of them might have been just like a normal, innocent person or something. But I'll confirm while you speak, I guess.
Right. So you kind of do the automatic thing, and then you realize right afterwards, damn, I didn't think about that at all. And then instant regret. I remember the moment I was like, I had this weird personal guilt. Like it was like very odd. Like I was like, what did I just do? And it made me like upset. I think I actually replayed the level to see if I could not do that. In fact, the game forces you to do that, but that's a whole other thing. The interesting thing is that they got me to do what they wanted me to do for their story using something they knew about their audience, right? Which is that they'll just treat this moment like it's any other level, and they'll just kind of whatever. And the shock value of that is potent. I don't remember what it meant for the story, so maybe it wasn't potent enough, but at least in the moment, it was really memorable to me. This kind of interactivity you can't have in movies, right? And you can't actually have it in almost any form of storytelling. Maybe like a choose your own adventure book. Like, I don't know. I can't think of a different form of storytelling where you can kind of mold the story as you go in that particular way. I can't think of one. But so this is a very unique thing that you can interact with it and it affect your environment, with the dawn of 3D gaming, as if it's new, but with 3D gaming, a lot of stuff approximates life or like something lifelike, something physically intelligible, and you're acting upon this kind of physical world. And so as you do so, you feel the effects of your decisions, even if the game is ultimately linear, if that makes sense. Okay. So that's cool. So how do we like utilize that, or how do I think? I might be wrong about everything I say, but how do I think that we can utilize that to tell stories very effectively? Let me talk about this next. So a lot of times when we have story games, we have really like two like polar opposite approaches. Either you have something super linear, like Tomb Raider, right? It's just like basically the story's on rails and you kind of get pushed through, and if you don't do the level the way it should be done, you lose the level and got to redo it, and it's just like, you're just being pushed through the story, there's like the hand of God that's just forcing fate upon you, the entire time. And there's an open world approach, like Skyrim, right? Where you have like 100% freedom most of the time to kind of go around and do whatever you want, right? Actually, what do you prefer, Nathan? I think I know the answer, but
Sorry, prefer like what? What are the options?
The sort of open or linear sort of approaches.
Linear.
Okay, why?
Because when games have an open approach, they start throwing their resources at things that don't really matter, and it becomes really unguided and unfocused. And it's kind of like it's like there's less control over the storytelling, and more randomness. So.
And is that a fair categorization that story-driven games tend to kind of like pick one of those two options, or is that like not a good characterization? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely like a gradient, right? Like you can say like GTA 5 is pretty on the open world side, where like is literally open world, but also like you can switch characters, you can do missions technically in a slightly different order, like because you follow three characters and the stories of the three characters can't deviate too far past each other, but you can you're not confined to the exact same order or whatever, which is kind of strange, when you think about it, I guess, for storytelling purposes and stuff like that. You can do side missions and stuff like that have their own story stuff and all that good stuff. So yeah, there's that, and then there's like Battlefield would be like a really linear example where you just cannot do anything else other than do the exact thing it wants you to do, like right now, pretty much. Although with no time constraint oftentimes, so it's not like you could literally walk backwards, I guess, sometimes, and nothing's going to happen to you. But yeah, there are like in-betweens between those two. But yeah, I would say generally speaking, yeah, you could categorize it like that.
Okay, cool. So one thing when I was thinking about this topic earlier today, I was thinking about is like what will allow you to do storytelling, because like we just described storytelling in detail early in the episode, and so we see that we need certain things. We need the ability to create tension. We need the ability to lope along. We need the ability to convey theme, right? And how do we do these things in a sort of uncontrolled at its base, right? Like if you just put a character in, I don't know, Unity's default thing, right? Like you're just in that you're starting from freedom, you know what I mean? Like you're not starting from constraint, you're starting from freedom. How do you do it? And the only thing I could think of, and maybe Nathan has better ideas, is that you can only constrain as your means of telling a story. And maybe that's the place to start. I don't know if I'm breaking ground here as in gaming stories, but your only way to create any of that in a reliable way, at least, is using constraint. I don't know what you think about that, Nathan.
So actually, it's interesting because that is kind of like how I think about, and I think how many people think about kind of game design, where you give the player some some cool tools to mess with, but it doesn't matter if like there is no constraint on that, so that can look like many different ways. The way that might overlap with this storytelling stuff is there's like constraint for game design purposes, at least in the map, right? Stuff like that. So yeah, no, I mean that's just I think that is interesting. It's an application of that way of thinking to story.
Right. So in that, I kind of thought of a few examples. These are examples. They're not exhaustive. Some of them might sound stupid to you if you're a game dev. Just take the principle of what I'm talking about and use it as you please, because I can't tell you what's best for you. But there are a few sort of constraints. And I actually recognize one thing that's really big about the way I'm going to be talking from here on out. It's going to be very RPG like focused, mostly because if I expanded it to something more like a city sim with a story or whatever, like we'd be here forever. So I can't do that. We're gonna stay in the realm of things that have 3D worlds with physical approximations and characters, right? So we're gonna kind of stay in that mode. And again, I think you can apply these ideas in abstract to other things. So there's a few things that we can constrain. We can constrain your character's literal abilities, right? So like the way their means of motion, like what they can do, how they act upon the outer world, right? We can constrain act breaks actually pretty easily. There's actually many ways. It could be leveling, right? Like the way you construct things through having levels, or save points, or whatever. There's like many ways to constrain things into acts. There is time, like literal time, like you can constrain it by saying you have to do this in a certain amount of time. But there's also pace too. Like certain things might be inevitable, right? Time can be.
Yeah, about time. So one of the issues that I don't know how to solve is that, like, pacing is not. It's hard to control pacing because if it's hard to control pacing if you don't set some sort of time limit, right? That time limit could like be, it depends on the game or whatever, right? It could be literally like, here's a timer, just do it within this time, or it could be like, there's this event that's going to happen, you know, if you don't do it within this amount of time or whatever it is, right? And the issue is that like, the issue is twofold. One, no, I guess it's really one issue, huh? Yeah, the issue is that like when you fail those time, like, when you have like, it creates like, the time creates a sense of tension on its own, and if you fail that and the timer resets, it's kind of like, well, whatever, you know, the tension's all gone, and you start it over again. It's especially bad if you fail over and over again, and it's kind of like, you know, oh, you hear it's like, you hear like the you know, intense music restart and stuff like that. It's like, okay, this is a weird feeling, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'll come to some solutions to that problem that I've kind of thought about. There is what you can see, right? So like, it could be like camera view angle, or like, I don't know, there's a mist over whatever conceptions you have of what you can see. And all video gaming requires video, right? So you need to see things in order to have a video game, right? And we have what you can hear on the other end of that, which involves music. So Ben makes a appearance, which controls what you hear. In the sense that you can literally not allow certain things to be heard, or you can force certain things to be heard, like music, right? Which obviously has its effects. Then you have UI elements, right? So you could control what things that are kind of separate from the, borrowing a film sound term in a very odd way, sort of diegetic the world around you versus like what's kind of like imposed upon you on your screen at all times or whatever. And so you could probably think of a whole bunch of other ways you can kind of constrain things. Kai says, speaking of Myst, Morrowind and Silent Hill both benefited, if I gather correctly, from early hardware limits. Yeah, that's interesting because it forces constraint. That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering. You said before that you mostly focus on RPG. Now, the terms are kind of confusing. Did you mean RPG or did you mean action adventure?
I don't know.
Like, name a game. That's another category.
I'm just thinking about the broad category of things where you are a player, like you are something. You know what I mean?
Story-driven games, I guess, would be the.
But can like a city builder with a story be a story-driven game? Because I'm not talking about that. You know.
No, I don't. I mean, maybe theoretically, but I don't know of anyone that's kind of like that. So I think you're safe in that department at least. I don't. No. I don't. Could one be? I guess it could, theoretically. I don't know. I mean, like, if it's like a Skyrim type thing, right? That's like art and RPG, right? Where it's like, yeah. But the thing is, you're talking about constraint, right? I think you're working towards like less options or something, or like more control of the dev, which would be like more action adventure, like a Tomb Raider type thing. I don't know. These words are very like fluid. So people, and also like if you go like it doesn't help that you go to like Steam or whatever. Like every company will try to label their game as like anything they can get away with. So you probably will see like Tomb Raider as an RPG or something like that. I don't know. But like when I think of RPG, I think of like D&D being like the tabletop RPG. You know, it's like you know, you make a lot of choices, you build up your character and stuff like that. and it's like a Skyrim, right, or like a Fallout. Whereas like a Tomb Raider, or I would say like Battlefield campaign would be like an action adventure, I guess, type thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I guess what I mean is, like, all I'm trying to say, I'm trying to constrain it to the types of games in which you are a character or characters. Like, you could swap characters, I suppose, but you are like, you are something and you act upon not you, right? So you do something externally, right? That's all I guess that's all because I don't want it to be like some strategy games or like tower defense game. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to
Bloons TD story.
Because you can apply these things, I'm sure, to those things, but like it's gonna be a lot weirder if you try to like one-to-ones take what I'm saying and like and apply those there.
I get what you're saying. I don't know what the term for it is, but the description is like obvious. So.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Got some chats here. So we've got, I think I missed this one earlier. Morrowind being misty in distance looks more magical. Silent Hill 2 looked creepier. Kai also says, stay tuned for my new roguelike Metrovania where your choices definitely matter. Ooh, that's kind of cool.
I think that's somewhat of a joke because I'm guessing. Am I wrong? Because roguelikes, typically the choices... What do you mean? Like, I'm thinking because like throughout runs, like your stuff gets reset. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what's happening. Maybe if you're talking about this current game, then maybe that actually is true. I don't know. Please enlighten us on. It's definitely a joke. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Now all these constraints. These are just examples again, but all these kinds of constraints are ways in which you should be trying to manipulate the things we talked earlier, which is act structure, pace, audience, and most importantly, the reason the audience should care about the story that you're telling. So there you go. And how might that be? So one thing that I as I was thinking about this, I was like, a lot of gaming, I think, is overly constrained by realism, like way more so than cinema or something like this, right? Like, I mean, like there is almost no reason, and in a lot of these in controlling a lot of these constraints, where you need any semblance to realism. And the reason I say this is because a lot of the problems that Nathan has mentioned on the show and other problems as I was thinking about this occur because there's like this tendency to want to take a mechanic and analogize it to like some realistic thing or like, and
yeah, it's crazy that we have so many FPSs, like there are a million of one of these things, but they mostly use conventional weapons. I don't understand why. Like, I mean, bring out some wands or something. I don't know. So, like, I know, like the most you'll get is like deviate to like future weapons, right? It's like all the same, So
right, it's kind of like the way that we've gone like with like operating systems, right? Like you have a desktop, right? It's like analogized to something like physical, and you say, where is it on my hard drive? Like, which, you don't mean that, like, there's a certain kind of analogizing to life, and those things are helpful, and you need it to be intelligible as a game, so you need some of those things, but things like dying, right, in a game, the word dying kind of imposes a kind of approach to what that is, if that makes sense. Where
it's really a hard issue. It's a hard issue.
Right. No, it is hard. But I'm saying there are a lot of ways you can craft details of a very different kind of experience around some of these maybe necessary mechanics, perhaps. I don't know.
I had an idea of a game where you play as a character who can't die. Which is this is not unique. Oh, I thought that this was unique, but since then, not literally, but you played as a character who was thematically like a phoenix. So like he would just be reborn every time he quote unquote died, and it wouldn't really affect him or whatever. But yeah, that was just me trying to figure out how to get rid of like the dissonance of like, oh, I was just in an intense moment and then I just restarted with like full HP, no stress, and everything's fine again. But,
right.
Yeah.
In fact, I wonder. I just thought of this. Maybe there's a game like this already. I don't know. But you could even have a game in which, like, your character can manipulate time, maybe, I don't know. And upon your death or something, you know, there's a reversal of time that occurs or something. I don't know. You get what I mean. And you kind of bake it in. There's ways in which it doesn't have to just even be a repeat, right, of the same thing that just happened a moment ago. So anyway, I'm just trying to say a lot of the constraints that you can add on your game don't have to analogize life. That's all I'm trying to say, which is a unique thing to gaming, which is pretty cool. Whereas in cinema, I do live action cinema by, you know, that's 100% what I do. So I'm only thinking in terms of like how things are in real life, even if I'm thinking of a fantasy story, right? It's bipedal humans, and you know, it's like, you know, it's you know, that's the way I think. Kai says, Irving, you almost literally described the premise of Braid 2009. Oh, well, there you go. Someone's already thought. I'm not surprised. Someone's already thought.
There's also a game coming out. I don't remember who's making it. I think it's a big studio. I don't remember what it's called. I remember seeing the trailer and thinking that the mechanic was that you rewound time before you died. Actually, was what I thought the idea was, although I wasn't entirely sure. So maybe,
right.
You know, they're working on it again.
and you know, this is kind of a sidetrack, but I remember in Last of Us, one way they really like made the dying work properly was they made it extremely gruesome, like, and unique. Like, there are a lot of death animations. When I say a lot, I mean there were a whole lot of death animations, and I think that's actually an understanding of what they were doing very well, right? Because they were creating a character-driven game, and no matter how many times you die, you don't want to see a new vicious death animation to your character. It doesn't feel good, you know. Like, it's just like, and there's nothing you can do once it starts, right? You're just kind of like, oh my goodness, you know, like that just happened, you know. And when you start over, the tension is not trying not to do that again, you know, if that makes sense. There's a natural care for the character that you're controlling.
Something that I also was thinking about recently. Someone mentioned like the fact that in video games, like it was actually a commentary not about video games specifically, but about like, I guess, greater society, and that like when you play a video game, there are typically not any real consequences, right? Like you play, if you lose, you just retry, right? The consequence, I guess, is it's not even a waste of time because you're having fun, hopefully, right? So, yeah, there's not really any consequence. Whereas compared to like outside of video games and like real life decisions, if you were to take the, you know, analogous of whatever's going on in game to real life, like obviously there are consequences to, you know, if you die, you just die, right? Or whatever. But I was thinking about what if there was a game where like you just died and that was it, can't play anymore. Obviously, you can always play it again. Like, how are you gonna stop the player from playing again? Like, you could pull a Doki Doki Literature Club and like make it so that the game is unplayable, but then they just like, you know, someone's gonna, you know, just figure out how to modify the game to make it playable again. And in the case of DDLC, like it was supposed to be possible to play again. But anyways, you could do something like that. Although, if it's like anything we're talking about, any sort of game we're talking about that we brought up, right? Obviously, those games you are going to die at some point, too early, right? Where that would be very upsetting if you just couldn't play again. And also, you have no control over when the end of the story is, which is weird, right? You could do like a thing where you can, when your character dies, you have to make a new character or something like that, right? Or like a Watch Dogs Legions type thing or something, you know. I don't know. I'm just saying random things, but
yeah, no, these are good ideas. Yeah,
definitely. Once again, hard to pull off, I assume. Which is, I assume, is why people don't just do this like willy nilly. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. Those are good thoughts. Those are good thoughts. Sorry, my brain is actually working on this gaming level now, where ideas are coming into my head. But you know, unconstrain yourself basically from reality. That's unchain, you know, from reality entirely. Don't conceptualize death. Why does a game even need death in particular? Why do you even need losing conditions? Like if you take you know, because there's this idea in gaming, right, of challenge, right, and that kind of creates fun. But why does it create fun? Is it tension? Is it a kind of an approximation of tension or something like this, or or achievement or whatever. Like, okay, again, think about this yourself as a game dev. You know gaming better than I do. But I'm saying, do you even need losing conditions in order to compel?
So in Portal, you can play. It's most of the levels you cannot lose.
Right.
There's no I mean, you just can't progress, I guess, for most.
But even in Portal, you can die, right? So I'm saying,
yeah, but most levels you can't. I'm saying right. It's very possible, considering you could remove those levels from Portal, right, where you can die, because most of them you can't die, right?
Right.
Those like turrets and whatever don't show up till later in the game. So.
Right. So what I'm saying is the drive to continue playing doesn't have to come from even achievement, right? Because we know we can compel people just from story. You don't get up, off your seat from a movie, right? Like mid-movie because, like, I don't know, you're not achieving something. Or I don't know. You get what I'm saying? Like, perhaps that's an idea that people can play with. What happens?
No, okay, Harris just said Nathan is describing a rogue. I think he's referring to what I'm talking about when when you lose your character when you die. Yes, I guess I described one might say a genre of games.
Right.
But there's no stories as far. Does Rogue have a story? The original Rogue? I don't know. I never played it. Like a story that's like does it end ever? Because how? Well, I'm conflating two ideas. So yeah, in Rogue you can obviously replay the game. You just characters dies. Yeah, okay, I see. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know how you make a roguelike story-driven game that's like an action adventure or something like that. Unless you want to rehear the story, I guess 9,000 times or something. But,
right. Yeah. Okay, so moving on into some of these ideas.
Go ahead. You said which took the idea from Dungeons and Dragons, possibly too lazy to Wikipedia. If you claim Rogue has a story, I will dispute that, but it's outside the scope of this conversation. Okay, I'm not claiming that. I don't know.
Right. But to continue on this sort of train of thought, so I was thinking about ways in which we can kind of destroy the binary nature of the sort of linear versus open sort of concepts, or like this bimodal distribution, if you want to put it that way, of games. And I was trying to think about maybe there's a conceptual problem where there's over constraint or not even under constraint. It's actually probably over constraint in two different ways. And it led me to think, if you started from scratch conceptually, right, with your mechanics being simply vehicles for story, if that's what you're interested in, there's a lot of ways in which I've never heard of games manipulating the world in order to constrain things to create the elements of story, right? So one of those ways I was thinking about is character ability, but not in the way that I think we traditionally think of. And I think most of the time character ability is as a reward, right? It's like a reward system. There's maybe a coolness factor to it. Maybe it's a penalizing system as well, like where you can lose abilities, depending, or resource management. Like, these are, again, very like analogized systems, and I'm about to mention another analogized system just for sake of example. But if we think of the definition of act again, oh no, my battery's. How's my video still go? Oh, there it goes. I'll fix that in a moment. But if you think about the definition of the act that we discussed earlier, all you need is something to change in a way that the player cannot revoke, right? So if we think of time, oftentimes games will allow unlimited time to complete things, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, and certainly that's good in a lot of cases, but you could imagine like a game like Skyrim, let's say, for example. You could imagine that a game like Skyrim, and I'm saying this as if there are no games like this, so I'm sure I'm not a genius and other people have done this before, but perhaps instead of thinking of things in terms of discrete levels, we think things in terms of a timeline of acts that are forced upon the player. And because those can be acts of God, they can be irrevocable in such a way that has nothing to do with levels, right? So, for example, if there's a volcano, right, on the map, and maybe this is a central point of the story and related to the theme, right? Perhaps, the volcano is at the point of eruption. You can always see in the distance, right? And this can mean something thematically. And as you're playing along, the theme of the volcano and what it represents can be kind of revealing itself to you, right? But it's fixed when that thing goes off.
Here's the issue. You have to educate gamers on that, because they're going to assume that volcano is going off whenever the heck it's supposed to go off, Like, it's going to be on some, so they can, like, take as long as they want to do everything else, You know what I'm saying?
You have to, though. You could just it could just be a surprise, right? Like, and the learning happens, and you want to play again.
Well, it depends. Well, maybe, because the issue is that, like, so they might get like a would this be an issue? Like, I don't know if I would, like, no, they might feel a little bit annoyed, right? And maybe understandably so, if they play a game, they don't realize this. Okay, explodes, like, okay, let me play again. But, like, it's like they wish they just, like, didn't do that the first time, you know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't, they just didn't know. Like, it's like they I guess, quote unquote, lost, whatever. They didn't get the desired outcome, not because anything that they did wrong, kind of. Like, they were just playing as you would normally play a video game, like anything else. I'm sure if you put this in, like, marketing or something like that, right? And, like, people should just know, or you just say at the end of the game, I
still think you're adding more, like, it doesn't even have to be that the game's over. It just means you've like, the that's what I'm saying. It's an act ending. It's not a game end, right?
But still, I'm saying, like, the player may figure this out, like, when the game's actually done or whatever, right? Like, when all the content's finished. But, like, if they're just dilly-dallying or whatever, right, the entire time, it might feel weird finding that out afterwards when, like, oh, I gotta play this again. Not because I necessarily want to play it again otherwise, just because, I didn't understand the game, essentially.
So here's a example to make this work potentially, right? What if the theme of your game is something like courage in the midst of wanting. Let's say your character is a whimsical character, right? And is very curious. So we kind of build up this character from the very beginning. And there's a sense of lack of responsibility that this character has. And maybe there's something that they could arm their smarts towards that would solve the problem of the town being destroyed by the volcano. I'm just making this up on the fly, right? And you as a gamer, you might be an exploring type person, which kind of makes you like that character. You see what I mean? And so you might be like, oh, okay, there's a story there, whatever, and you just go, you go ignoring it and you go exploring, and maybe there's a lot of stuff to explore on purpose, right? So there's a lot of content there to explore. And then when the volcano goes off and the town is destroyed and, I don't know, your love interest character is killed, right? There's like a interesting sort of like grafting of your own nature to the character's nature that caused it all to happen, right? And then the story continues to progress, so it's not a punishment, right? So like you can still keep playing, but you've actually learned something about the story and the character and everything, and you've baked the mechanics sufficiently into the theme and all the aspects of the story that it's kind of blaring at you, if you get what I mean, that you should be doing this now, like. But
how do you learn? Like, how does the player know that wasn't just like scripted to be?
Could be a lot of things. Could be dialogue. Could be the way questing works.
And dialogue that like. Oh, unless it's like maybe like if it's not like something like you're playing the game on like no warning. Obviously, there's a warning as in there's a volcano. No warning, it just like erupts or whatever. But I guess if you have like characters that comment on it or something like that,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Progressively or something, I don't know.
Let's say AI dynamically, like starts to react more and more. Let's say there's earthquakes prior to, and then there's even information being fed to you through other characters, like every time there's an earthquake within 5 seconds of each other, we've got 1 hour to evacuate the city. I don't know. You get what I mean. You can kind of bake in the mechanic into the story such that you don't have to just like say what it is, and you can make the constraint a pure form of time, and the story progresses regardless, right? I don't know. Maybe that's just an example, right? And so, that what is that? That's kind of an in between, right? Of like the sort of like on rails, like forced nature, right? And a purely open world system. And you might actually be able to, from a technological perspective, I know it's hard to make tons of content to allow branching in like in story, right, to occur. That's always the inevitable problem with decision making. But this might allow you to make constraints that either have similar thematic consequences that can converge in such a way that doesn't feel like, oh, I'm converging because I can't think of a better way to eliminate branches, you know what I mean, like a Telltale Games game or something like that, where sometimes you just kind of feel, I'm trying to delete this branch. I mean, like, figure out a way to make it rejoin the main trunk or something. But you maybe just have these little binary moments, right, where it's just like two things, and because you thought about story from the very beginning, it doesn't feel like you're forced. An example I thought of earlier, and this kind of has to do with character ability, right, is perhaps you have a choice at one point to get rid of your main weapon item or something like this. Maybe you're armed with a pistol to begin with, and your friend has a bow and arrow. I'm just making this up, right? And your friend dies in a particular scene, and that bow and arrow has a thematic meaning to it. Like, it's not just a cool bow and arrow and it's sentimental because my friend character died. It means something, right? And we start to subconsciously feel what that means because we've been thinking of story from the very beginning. And you have a choice as to whether you want to give up your pistol or grab your bow and arrow, right? Perhaps later on in a final scene or like a interesting scene or something like this, or interesting level, however your game is conceptualized, when you use that particular weapon, it means something when you used it. Like maybe if the bow and arrow represented the down-to-earth nature, I don't know, that's a stupid example. I don't know, you get what I mean. If it means something and you use it and it means something differently as to whether you're using the other weapon, but they both have baked-in meanings that went to the same theme, they can converge without it feeling corny. Does that make sense? You've learned two different things. Like you've come to two different heads, but we've come to a head, and the act ends. So now we're at the same footing going forward. And so it puts the pressure off of like plot and puts the pressure on theme, which is much easier to handle, in terms of making things converge. Hopefully that makes sense. And so on and so forth. So you can do this with a whole bunch of aspects of gaming, I'm sure, and let your imagination run wild. Okay, so I'm going to speed through the last few bullet points here because I've been going on long. A few pieces of advice for those of you who are conceptualizing these things. Don't put pressure on yourself to write it in a very particular manner. Like, let me break out writer duet and whatever all the famous screenwriting things, and let me just start from the first scene and write. No, don't do that. Like, or I mean, do that if that's what you're comfortable with, if that's how you think. But facilitate the way you naturally tell stories. Tell the story to a friend. It helps a lot. I've solved like story problems by just recounting the story out loud to Steph, right? And then I feel the loping, I can feel the pace, and I can feel where it feels weird, or it doesn't feel justified, or I'm losing track of the main point, and I can add in. Sometimes spontaneously, I'm just like, as I'm telling the story, I'm like, let me just invent the next part of the story right here and right now as I understand it, right? Write in the way that you're comfortable. Tarantino famously writes like a crazy person, right? But his stories are extremely coherent and thematic, right? Don't feel constrained to do it in a particular way. Just do what gets words on paper, or if words on paper is not how you're doing it, do it in such a way that, facilitates progress, right? The other piece of advice is going to sound weird, but trust me, it's important. Tell the truth. I'm sick and tired of stories that have no interest in truth. almost every one of your favorite stories are trying to convey something that at least the author thinks is true. And you feel a lot better when you're watching those, I guarantee. They feel classic, they feel good, right? Tell the truth in your stories. And if you don't have something you're trying to say in terms of the reason for your story existing, ask questions that you actually want the answer to. Don't just ask questions. Again, almost every one of your favorite films that you were like, that really put a good question in my head, you can feel that the film is the example, medium for me, the film wanted to know the answer, even if the artist did not know the answer. This is what we're built for, abstractly. We're built to want to know what is good, true, and beautiful. So do those things, please. So even if your story is like on the more silly side or whatever, like you might be like, well, it's a comedy. Like, what? I just want to have fun with my audience. Totally fine. But the best comedies that you remember, let's take Rush Hour, for example. Really silly, stupid, fun movie. There are a lot of really deep themes in that film that are just kind of running under the surface, right? About how different people can come together, have different backgrounds, and thrive, just out of respect. That there's a need to check oneself, right, at the door when it comes to common human experiences, so on and so forth. Just say something, right? Even the stupidest action movies, they say something, and the best ones that you love and remember really say something. So say something. Okay. When it comes to dialogue, I highly, highly, highly recommend, if your thing relies on good dialogue, outsource that thing. If you possibly can. Dialogue is really, 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 really hard. It's so hard that Hollywood still messes it up all the time. So, dialogue is very difficult because dialogue can be stylized, it could be realistic, it can be all kinds of things, and that's a whole topic for another day. But if dialogue is burdensome to you and you want to focus on theme, plot, and all the other tools that we were talking about earlier, find a friend who can write really good dialogue. If not, my recommendation is to only write characters that you understand intimately. So if your main character if it's a character-driven thing, or even if it's not a character-driven thing and you have like this very like strong archetype type character, cliches, not in a negative sense, just a cliche type of thing, maybe pick a character that you can fit that cliche. You know what I mean? Like, you can fit that person's experiences, and then write from what you know. Write what you know is the best advice. In fact, I don't write stories that I have zero understanding of from a personal perspective. I just don't do it. It almost doesn't make sense to me to do that. Even though I'm talking about, I have stories that take place in Texas or like take place in wherever, I don't live in those places, but like the core of the story is very me, so write what you know. And that will help you with your dialogue and your character choices. Let your characters pick what they want to do. Don't force your characters to do certain things. If you need to get to a certain image and your character is not going to get there, you have a problem. And problems have solutions. But your solution can't be to cheat your character, right? So, think accordingly. And the last piece of advice is to challenge yourself to make the writing and storytelling experience, again, no matter how silly your story is or whatever, or how lighthearted your story is, challenge it to make it a personal journeying process. Again, sounds weird if you're a game dev and you're like, I'm just trying to make people have fun, man. I'm not trying to go through an existential crisis. This is like, it's crazy because when you direct something, this is what I want to get back to when it comes to directing. When you direct something, you realize that the thing happening in front of you is a completely different art form than the thing that ends up on the screen later. You actually do two acts of art simultaneously when you are directing. One, no one will ever see because they'll never be there, right? And and certain people can experience it. Actors experience this all the time, right? And what is that? Is the subjective experience of acting is its own art form, and it takes on its own sort of like its own internal art form as they perform. But then there's a purpose to that performance, which is for me to capture and make another story, right? There's a whole world they built that is like completely like unseeable, right? From the perspective of the story, if I'm not going to expose it as the director. The same thing is true when you write anything. You're going to learn some things about yourself if you do this right. Even for silly stories, I guarantee. You're gonna think a lot harder about life and about what's good, true, and beautiful, and all that kind of stuff. Embrace that. Like, and if it takes longer, again, restraint. Like, you don't have to make every story that you think of. You don't have to complete them all, even. Although, don't do the thing where you start a billion and never finish any. But, don't feel like the actual writing experience itself can't be its own internal art form, if that makes sense. It's an own internal performance, right? And that will actually make the external performance a whole lot better. And I guarantee your favorite storytellers, whether they write books, direct movies, or whatever, that's how they write. You listen to any interview of them talking about their writing process, it's always an internal art form that processes out. Okay. So that's what I've got about writing and gaming. Don't know if that will be helpful, but
Nice.
maybe, hopefully it helps somebody.
Yeah, that's good. Especially as I would say my least knowledgeable area in gaming is like story stuff. So,
Yeah.
what do you think about saves coming?
Huh?
What do you think about saves coming?
Save scumming?
Yeah,
What is that?
it's like when you like save before an important part of the game in case you want to rewind. Essentially, it's essentially the rewind button of video games.
I don't know. I mean, there's potentially a lot of ways to address it. I can imagine that you can have save points only at the beginning of acts, right? That could be a very natural way to do it. And then as simultaneously, you structure your acts so that they take a reasonable amount of time. So in a movie, an act there could be a one-act film that's 2 hours long technically, but that's not typically the pace, of a movie, right? Like, typically you have an act happen every 10 to 45 minutes. A wide range, but that's still like a fixed, generally about right, So maybe don't have a game act that's longer than 45 minutes if you don't want people to that's actually both shorter or longer than something like that, to prevent, because then people hopefully will feel more inclined and natural to keep going on. I don't know. That's just the first thought about it. But I'm sure you could think of better ways to do that in the context of what I've said.
Mm-hmm. As garbage as the game was, Life is Strange did kind of mess with that, and the fact that basically you rewind any time, kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Also, Kingdom Come Deliverance infamously did not let you save until essentially I think it has certain save points. I don't know if it's at the act or what they use as their save thing. That's pretty infrequent, and I think you were able to craft, it was weird because it's like a Skyrim-esque type game, right? Just to give context, and so it takes place in a low technology world. You could craft save something. I don't know, save potions. I don't know what they're called or whatever. It was it's very game ejecting. You have to craft them or whatever. And on day one, a mod appeared to have infinite saves.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if you enjoyed any of this, or if you have any ideas, I would love to hear them, because I found thinking about this extremely fascinating. And I would love to talk about this further down the line. I also would love to write a game. I really would. I really want to do that. That just sounds extremely fun, extremely challenging, because then I have to talk to people about mechanics and technical things in order to execute, which is kind of cool challenge. So I don't know. Maybe if you have the right idea, there could be a collab. I'm just saying. So hit me up in the Discord. It's possible. It's possible. I'm very busy,
Submit
but
your ideas to Mixed Media Publishing.
I love art so freaking much. we'll see. So hit us up in the Discord about any thoughts that you have, or leave a comment below, and we'll surely read it. And we'll probably read it on the next episode if it's relevant, and respond to it then if you really want to. So yeah. If you like this, hit the like button. And again, thanks to 99 Crime, Kate Kairos, Post, and Alex Egbert for supporting us for $5 a month at mixedmediapodcast.com, or the link is on mixedmediapodcast.com. Their link to the locals, which is our support page, is in the description. And there's stuff coming on the podcast, constantly evolving in the background, even though it doesn't look like it. I promise there are things happening in terms of revamping the show. There's stuff happening. So definitely thank you for those people for making that possible, because it costs money to do almost anything. So very much appreciated. And last, after this segment, will be Nathan doing Arguing with Reddit for gaming. Perfect timing. All right, here we go.
Mixed Media Gaming.
Welcome to Mixed Media Gaming Part 2. This segment will be Arguing with Reddit, where I will take a look at some hot takes from Reddit and respond to them. Two of them were chosen by my co-host, so I have not seen them yet, and one of them was chosen by myself, and I barely thought about it. So honestly, I don't even remember what it is at this point. So we'll see together. Yeah, let's get into it. Oh, let's reintroduce ourselves as per usual. Yeah, my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
My name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella, based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
My name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
Sweet. So this first one is from you, Ben, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. This is maybe more of a kind of business side question. So the title is Contractor Not Communicating. What do I do? I'll kind of summarize it. I think basically this person is a solo dev, and they hired an art contractor help with a bunch of assets for my game. This person is apparently a student in their final year at university. And the noticed a few issues immediately, which were that he thought that the rate was maybe too high for a student, and that they took a little bit too much time, more time they should have for initial tasks. But they really liked this person's portfolio, and the person actually reached out to this student on their own, having discovered the student's work. But now the person is the student who's working for them as their art contractor, hasn't communicated for 3 weeks and is not given any updates. They're supposed to be working 10 hours per week, and they've asked multiple times to give some progress, and they haven't responded for 3 weeks. And when they did respond prior to that, they basically several days later said they had excuses and didn't give much of an update. It says it's now been 2 full months since we signed a contract after a paid art test, and they haven't delivered anything finished, just screenshots. This person feels like they want to know what they should do. They feel this is the first time collaborating with somebody else on a project, and they're wondering if they did something wrong. And yeah,
interesting. This went a little bit of a different direction than I expected it to go. I thought it would be just the contractor entirely ghosts the person, because I've heard of that before. I think maybe this is a hindsight thing, but I would imagine that you'd want like some sort of like deadline clause in your contract or something, right? Where it's like, it could be even a very permissive deadline where it's like longer than you expect it to take, but just so that I guess you couldn't have them taking like literally forever, just to do it or something. I don't know what it's like if you didn't have that, like what the sort of like legality of that stuff is, where like, okay, it's like an implicit assumption of like, for this amount of work, like it's not going to take you 10 years, for example, right? So like, I would assume there's like some point, technically some sort of implicit clause of like, you can't take a certain amount of time. I don't know how much work it is, so I don't know how reasonable or unreasonable this is. it seems like there's a decent amount of money invested in this, given that it's 10 hours per week, and it's been going on for 2 months. There's a lot of money to pay people because people are expensive. So, yeah, it's definitely important to like deal with that for sure. Based on that, at least. I don't know if this is like a contract where it's like a pay as you go, or like a pay at the end, or a pay at the beginning, or like or maybe in chunks. I don't know what it is, but if money is currently invested, that is especially bad for an unfinished product. If no money's invested, then it's not too big of a deal. Obviously, it'd be nice to to support the game's timeline, to have art whenever the art is supposed to be a thing. But at least it's easier to recover from that, right? As for what to do, like I would imagine that if we're just thinking about all the options that are possible, right? Yeah, like such as suing somebody. I think that's probably the last thing you'd want to do, considering the immense hassle that would be. But also, if there's nothing else that you can do, I suppose that is the way. But of course, we should go diplomatically first before we go to suing people like that. So, maybe asking like why is it, like bringing that concern to the person of like, hey, there's not been much progress, and why is that, right? Because there might be a legitimate reason, actually, right? This person is apparently in the final year of university, and maybe it's just tough. I don't know. Maybe it's tougher than expected.
That was what I was going to say, especially if it's like their last semester too. They're graduating in like less than a month. There's probably a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Doing, make sure you don't fail classes before you graduate, and applying for jobs, and all that good stuff. So, yeah, it could be legitimately bad, or it could be something not very legitimate. But I got to find out, right? So I got to ask and try to sniff it out, I guess. So that'd be the first, I think, point of action, instead of asking Reddit what to do. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I think after that, what you do would depend on whether you already paid or not, and how much it matters that you have the art now. Because if you don't need the art now, and you haven't paid anything, and it's like some illegitimate purpose, or the purpose is legitimate, but you realize it's not going to really work out, then you can move to someone else with not really, it's like, it's okay. You don't need any compensation or whatever for that. So, yeah.
Makes sense. This next one's from you, Nathan.
Okay, what did I see? Which game made you love a genre you disliked? This person says, in his case, he has two. I never really liked simulation games. These aren't my cup of tea. I'm more into RPGs and story-driven games. Wow, I should watch this podcast episode. That was until I had a chance to try the first City Skylines. Okay, this is the first time I'm reading this description.
City Skylines, wow.
It's kind of funny. Yeah. It was free on the PlayStation Store. I started playing it one day, and suddenly it was the next morning, and I was there still sitting on my couch playing. It didn't happen since I was a young boy. Never bought City Skylines, but now I see simulation games with another set of eyes, so much that a few weeks ago I decided to purchase my first simulation game, Stardew Valley. Very different, but okay. And I've been addicted to it that sometimes I cannot believe it. Lol. Okay. Which game has been that one for you that's changed your perspective on the genre or renewed your gaming tastes? So this is interesting because I would say that really, if you were to look at my game rankings, I think the lowest might be League of Legends. I think. And there's a MOBA, right?
Yeah.
Multiplayer online battle arena. I don't like MOBAs in general. That being said, there are two that I really enjoy, and they are somewhat unconventional. One of them is Battle Right. Actually, you and I played that, Irving. I don't remember that, ages ago.
Is that the one with the horses or something, like steeds at the beginning?
There might be. Were there? Yeah, I think so. I think there were.
When the match starts.
So. Yeah, and it's like top down, right? Is that your thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I sucked. I did.
It was hard. And aside from that, and this is relevant. This is, I guess, news, but I didn't say in the news segment because I don't know if it's important enough. It's important to me. I don't know if it's important enough to anyone else. But So there was a game called Gigantic that I would rate pretty highly. Gigantic was good, and it was a pretty unique MOBA. It was kind of like Smite, I guess, in a way, but better in my opinion. And basically, the game died like pretty soon after it released. I don't know why. I thought it was a great game. I feel like it was a game that a lot of people actually really enjoyed. I'm not sure what happened, but it's coming back actually. It's called like Smite something edition. I forget what it's called now, but like I think it's a Rampage edition or something like that. I don't know, but it's just coming back. It's apparently it's the same game but with some added stuff. I don't know why. I don't know what happened. I don't think the IP even changed hands. I don't know, but it is coming back, and that game was one of the MOBAs that I did like. And I think I just like MOBAs where I can control the character, like obviously you control the character in MOBAs, right? You have to. But I mean direct, like in a more direct way, and less passively like, okay, the character kind of does things automatically by himself thing. I don't know. I guess I'm not really a big fan of that. I don't know, not entirely sure why, but those are good. And there's also a MOBA called Super MNC. That was Super Monday Night Combat. That like this is like a legend in my brain. Like I don't know if this is like a real a real thing. Like, from when I was like a kid. And like I played this game like twice, and then like it immediately like vanished. Like it just stopped like existing or something like that. I don't know what happened. But I remember thinking like it was really fun for the 2 times I played it, and then I never was able to play it again. And my memory is so faded of it. Like it basically like almost doesn't exist. And I'm like, was that even real? I'm sure I can look it up, I guess, and confirm whether it's real or not. But yeah, that's my answer.
Cool. This next one is from me. Pull it up here. What is happening? Oh no!
What is this image?
Oh no, it's not the same link. There we go. You've never seen this meme template before? This meme template.
I don't think so.
I have no idea what it's from. I think it's probably something famous. But
It's like a Norman Rockwell. I'm not familiar with it, but it looks like.
It looks like what?
Norman Rockwell.
Oh, okay.
The painter.
Yeah. So the question here is, what is a video game hot take you will take to your grave? And this is one of those classic, there's lots of takes in here, but I thought some of these were interesting. So the first one is simulator games can be used to teach real-life skills.
I think that's obvious. Don't they use simulation games like in actual like training situations? Yeah. Like rally like rally races will use like rally racing games, or I don't know, maybe other races do too. Obviously not the same as the real thing, but better than like nothing, right? And like flight sims for flight people, right? Stuff like that.
Yes, I know the takeoff sequence for an F-14. If I saw an F-14 in real life, it's weird that I could literally flip the right switches and get it to run. It's freaking an odd thought.
How long would you have to keep it in the air?
I probably could keep it in the air, minus the physical sensations. Like, if those are too overwhelming, then, that might be a problem. But
that is why, like I feel like the physical sensations are, like, the precise reasons why you couldn't just go from dirt rally simulator to playing to the real life thing is that you'd be getting tossed around. You'd be like, you'd be like actual, like fear of death, stuff like that. So, yeah.
Exactly. Like I literally read the Navy, like, and I didn't read the whole manual, but I've read parts of the Navy manual to know how to fly properly, which is very odd. Very odd thought.
But Kakaros in chat did confirm that MNC existed. I'm glad that someone else knows about this. That's not just me.
Yeah.
And this is a Norman Rockwell painting called Freedom of Speech, hence the contact.
Okay, that makes sense. Another one is Anthem could have been saved. I feel like you played Anthem, right?
I've not played Anthem.
Oh,
I've seen tiny amounts of footage of it. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to have an opinion on that.
Okay, this next one is games shouldn't be made for everyone. Trying to appeal to everyone ends up making a game appeal to no one. Kind of touched
that. Yeah. Although that wasn't really the case. That so you had said that most people or most people are making games for a general audience. Well, so I mean that kind of like
yeah, but you have to make it for a core audience still is kind of the
right,
both,
yeah. Yeah, because there's not necessarily in storytelling, but at least in everything else, you should always have your target audience in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's gonna be playing these games and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I would trying to appeal to everyone ends up. It depends how much, right? Yeah, like you have a core audience, but I suppose if you literally try to make a game that everyone would like, you're just not going to make a game. It's not going to be possible. I guess you take it to the extreme. I think it's just a matter of how generally appealing you decide to make it. I guess I don't know.
Kind of like the Disney, like the corporate. How do we make a Disney film that everybody will love, right?
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, they literally had like the Star Wars whiteboard, and the committee that's like deciding, what can we throw in this project and people will like.
Yeah, no games by Disney committee. That's not good.
Okay, but there are some things that everyone likes, right? Like everyone likes Beethoven, right? Right, Ben? No one hates Beethoven. That's crazy.
I mean, I guess there's probably a lot of people who are totally indifferent to classical music. So I don't know.
But no one listens to Beethoven. It's like that's disgusting.
You're right. I don't think I've ever met anybody who said that. Mozart can be more controversial.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. I don't know if you want to do any more. Let's see if there are any other interesting ones. More games need to prioritize player progression over character progression. Oh, that's kind of an interesting one.
So the player and character being differentiated as the player is the human behind the screen, the character is the virtual character. More games need to prioritize player progression over character progression. I think it really just depends, right? Like some games are literally about doing the coolest things possible, and the reward is like getting the next shiny thing, right? So for your character to be able to do or whatever, right? But yeah, sure, there are games where it's about I like to categorize it in two ways, where it's like knowledge-based progression, where it's like you learn things. So an example of that would be like chess. I would say is a game. It's entirely of knowledge-based progression because it's all mental, And then the other side of the coin is like skill-based progression, which is like if you were doing like a long jumping competition, right? Or something, I don't know. Like there's no you don't think about it. You know what I'm saying? It's about like you're what you're trying to do. It's the execution that's in question, right? I don't know if I don't think you need those necessarily. Even I think the getting shiny thing is okay sometimes. It just depends. I don't know. I think it's too big of a blanket statement.
Yeah,
and I think maybe the reason why this one and the prior one were kind of blanket statements and were highly uploaded, it might be because people think that there are too many games that fall prey to the criticism that's being made. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Cool. Well, that's arguing with Reddit. That's the last one. Want to take us out, Nathan?
All right. Yeah. Thank you for watching this segment of the Mixed Media Podcast. Next time, you guys should tune in because we're doing a double music music event, and that'll cap off our I guess end of April. April 1st.
Double music.
Oh yeah, sorry,
movies, right?
Double movies, yes.
Double movies.
Yes, that's what's happening. Yeah, double movies.
Double movies, yeah.
Wait, Ben, do you know what you're talking about yet? Or
I'm still gonna go with Andrei Rublev and I don't know, something like the storytelling format of that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so tune in next time to see that. That's really funny actually because that was to be on the 30th, and this was supposed to be an April 1st thing. It was literally the exact opposite end of the month. So now we ended up here, but I guess it makes sense. It's a 3-week event. we started we started 2 weeks late. So yeah, ended up at the end of the month. But subscribe for that. Make sure to, if you want to continue the conversation, you can go to mixedmediapodcast.com. You'll find a link to our Discord. That's the best way to interact with us post episode and sort of chat about anything. And if you have a hot take you'll take to the grave that you'd like to share, then that would be interesting. So yeah. And with that, thanks for watching.
Yep. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching and listening.
Look, tell a man no trouble, I don't want beef, man, I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. You know, like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We pack, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm more righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone vipers.